Welcome. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at this ACASIS 10-in-1 USB-C hub with SSD enclosure. So this was provided to me by the distributor, but they're not compensating me for this video and they're not reviewing it before I post it. If you find this video helpful and you want to purchase one of these, I'll put a link to it in the description. Let me get the plastic off here. So this has many functions on it. You can install an M.2 NVMe or SATA SSD, has up to 1000 megabits per second transfer speed, up to 8 terabyte storage, 100 watt PD fast charging, expand 4K extra display, compatible with 4 sizes of SSD. Looks like there's different colors here, silver, gray, black. This is silver. It contains the hub, a Type-C cable, silicone cover, thermal pad, rubber grommet, user manual, and here are all the functions. So there's lots of functions on here. It essentially adds in all the ports to a MacBook Pro that the old MacBook Pros used to have. So we have an SD card slot, a TF card, which is micro SD card slot, 3.5mm audio, a Type-C 3.1 port, a USB 3.1 Gen 2 port, and a USB 3.0 port, M.2 SSD enclosure, PC USB-C to host, power delivery, gigabit Ethernet, and HDMI. Okay, so here's the hub. Here's the cable. Has a silicone sleeve. So a lot of people will probably be taking this portably to carry it around with their laptop. So that's nice to have this sleeve so when you throw it in your bag, it's not scratching things or getting scratched. Here's a thermal pad. And here's a manual. So we have the diagram of the parts here. It says connect the PC port of your hub to your PC with accessory USB-C to C data cable. Using large power consumption devices with hub, please plug a power adapter to the PD port. Otherwise the hub may work unstably and does not work. A phone laptop charger does work. For HDMI function, ensure your laptop USB-C 3.1, Gen 2, and USB-C 3.2 Thunderbolt 3 supports DisplayPort Alt mode. Here's how to install the SSD. Detach the lid of the SSD enclosure through the groove. Stick the thermal pad on top of your SSD. At a 45-degree angle, slide in your SSD until it is fully seated, align with the edge. And it does say the thermal pad can be removed without residue. It says fix the SSD with the rubber grommet. Reattach the lid of the SSD enclosure. And it supports lots of different sizes of SSDs. And here are some specs if you want to read through those. So let's pop this open. There's a little groove there. Okay, that came off pretty easily. So the SSD I'm going to be installing in here is a Samsung 980. I'll press that in. So when I put an SSD in like this, I like to wiggle it up and down just a tiny bit. You don't have to break anything, but I just make sure it's seated. So instead of using a screw, this uses a little rubber plug to attach this. So you have a little notch in your SSD. You want to put the plug in there, and then we'll press it down. And there we go, it's toolless. Then we have the thermal pad. So it has some film on both sides, and that will go on top. So that's to transfer the heat from the SSD to the aluminum, and then I'll put the top back on. So there's a little ball bearing detent in the end and a little divot there, on both ends actually. So our SSD is installed now. So to plug this into the PC, we want to plug in to the PC port. So I'll plug in there. So if you have a laptop, you could plug your laptop adapter in here to provide power to this, and then just plug this into your computer. So let's look at the ports here. We have the USB ports. We have Type-C 3.1, USB 3.1, and USB 3.0, audio, and we have the SD cards and the gigabit Ethernet here, and HDMI. So this would work well with a laptop like a MacBook. I'm going to connect this up to my Mac Mini with the M1 processor. It should work pretty much the same as connecting it up to a MacBook. So on a MacBook, you might be adding all these ports that you don't even have. I have some of these ports on my Mac Mini already. One thing you can do is if you mount your Mac Mini on the back of a monitor or under a desk or something, you could put this on top of your desk to have access to your ports while your main computer is hidden. So I'm going to connect this up, I'll plug things into it, and I'll do some tests. Okay, so I'm at my Mac desktop. I'm going to plug the hub in. I'll go up to my devices and see if it recognizes it. So it looks like it's showing up right here because I see the SSD here. So we'll close this, and we have the SSD there. This is formatted as NTFS, so I'll reformat that real quick. Okay, so I'll run Blackmagic speed test. I'll change my target drive here. I'll hit start. So here we're getting around 759 megabytes per second write and 670 megabytes per second read. On the writes, we're up to around 800, and reads we're at 636. Okay? Okay, so I'm recording this later, but I discovered some things with this. I was using the Samsung 980 SSD, and then later I tried my Samsung 970 EVO Plus, and it was becoming unstable. So if we go back to the instructions here, we see the second bullet point said to use a power adapter with it if it's unstable. So I connected up this 20-watt power supply to the PD port here, like so, and then this drive was no longer unstable. So then I tried it with this drive again, and when I had this drive in here, I did another speed test, and the speed on it was 868 read and 765 write. So I got faster read and write times with this when it was plugged into the power. Now I'm on a Mac Mini. If you have this plugged into a laptop, you can have your laptop power supply plugged into here, and that will supply the power for the hub and then pass it through to your computer, and that should be plenty of power for this. But otherwise I did run all the other tests and everything else seemed to work without having this plugged in, and it did seem to work with the 980 drive drive without the external power, but the 970 didn't seem to work, and it worked better with power with this drive. Now I'll get back to the rest of the video. So now I'm going to plug in a Samsung bar USB flash drive. I'll plug this into the USB 3.1 slot. I'll select that drive in Blackmagic speed test. I'll run that test. Here we're getting around 58 megabytes per second write and 316 megabytes per second read. Okay, so I have a SanDisk Extreme Pro 32 gigabyte micro SD card. I'll plug that in. I'll switch to that drive. I'll run the test. Here we're getting around 70 megabytes per second write and around 90 megabytes per second read. So I have a SanDisk Ultra SD card, so that's the full-size SD card. I'll plug that in. I'll switch to that device. And this is an older card. I expect it to be quite a bit slower. That's not terrible. 38 megabytes per second write and 44 megabytes per second read. So those tests are all dependent upon the devices I just plugged in. Your results can vary depending on what devices you have plugged in. So I'll close that. Next I'm going to plug in the network to this. I'll go to my system preferences. I'll go to network. I'll go to this AX88179A. So I'm going to turn off Wi-Fi to make sure I'm not using my Wi-Fi. And now we're running off Ethernet. I'll close this. I'm going to open up a speed test. So this speed test is running on my network, so it's independent of my internet speed. So this is connecting to a NAS on my network. So I'll hit start here, and this will do the speed test. So here we're getting around, it's around gigabit speed here. This is for upload. Or is this down? Yeah, that's download. Let's see how upload goes. So same thing on upload. So it doesn't really make sense to use this Ethernet port on here when I have one on my Mac Mini, but I know people will be using this with a laptop, so I wanted to test this. And if you plug this into a gigabit Ethernet, this will support gigabit speeds. Now, you'll never get 1000 exactly on anything like this, especially with the speed test. What you're looking for is something to be really close, and this is a good result. So you can use this as sort of a dock on your computer. One thing to keep in mind is that I have all these drives connected here. I do need to eject these before I unplug it. So I'll right click on here and I'll say eject. And that will eject all of those drives, and then I can go ahead and unplug it when they're all ejected. So I'm going to stop the screen recording now. I am going to plug my monitor in here to test the video, and I'll shoot a short clip of that. Okay, so here's the hub, and you can see all the other things I have plugged in here. This is plugged into the computer back here. I have the USB drive, I have the two SD cards, and you can see it did work with both of those at the same time. I have Ethernet over here, and I plugged the monitor in here too. And that is working. So like I said, with the Mac Mini, it doesn't make sense I'd plug the Ethernet in here as opposed to just plugging it into the computer itself. But there's certainly a case that could be made for plugging a monitor in because this has one HDMI port. And if you don't have a cable with USB Type-C to HDMI, you could use this adapter so you could plug in a second HDMI cable to this. And that will give you 2 monitor support. And I think this only supports up to 2 monitors. So I'll head down to my shop and I'll sum this up. Okay, so here's a view of things plugged in with a little better lighting. We have the micro SD card, the SD card here. So those fit in. The USB drive. So I'll unplug this here and I'll check out the little boot or the sock we have for it. Oh, and I don't know if I showed it earlier. There are these plastic feet on here on both sides, and here is the silicone sleeve. So with that in place, we can still plug in all the ports, Ethernet, HDMI, it all works. So if you have a laptop that only has USB Type-C ports and you're looking to expand upon that, I think that's a great option. This is very compact for what it contains. You could potentially get some sort of a hub and then plug your external drive into it, but since this contains your external drive, it consolidates that one piece into this. And this has pretty much all the ports a laptop would have. You have Ethernet, HDMI, SD cards, USB ports, and audio. You could leave this at your desk and then disconnect your laptop from it. When you get back to your desk, plug it in, and you have everything connected up. But like I said, you do need to eject things before you disconnect it. So that's the ACASIS 10-in-1 USB hub with SSD enclosure. That's all I'm going to cover in this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you liked this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate it if you could do that. And thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.